We've all been there. We've all frozen years of our life. And a lot of that we come to label and define as suffering. And today, goody, we're going to talk about suffering. How fun is that? In the back of our main textbook, which is called The Science of Mind, one of the genius books ever written by our founder, Ernest Holmes, if you have this, you're aware that in the back of the book, there's a glossary with a bunch of definitions in terms of bringing a coherency to a lot of metaphysical language and a lot of metaphysical words. The interesting thing about the glossary is that the word that has the most space in terms of a definition is, are you ready for this? It's not love. It's not ice cream. It's repression. The word that has the most lengthy explanation is the word repression. And one of the little pieces of that, Ernest Holmes writes, it is claimed that a large percentage of diseases is caused by the suppression of some form of emotion. We understand the corollary between mind, body, spirit science, so that makes perfect sense, that things that are judged or withheld or repressed. Have you ever tried to take a cap off of a hot steaming radiator in your car? It's like there's something so voluminous that is wanting to build up in there that if it has nowhere to go with our cooperation, then it must channel itself through the physical, right? He says, any desire that remains unexpressed finds itself in a large percentage expressed as disease. Things will stand to just so much pressure and no more. When a limit is reached, an explosion will follow, unless some avenue of this expression is provided. If we were completely expressed, self-actualized, self-aware, self-expressed individuals, we would never become sick or unhappy. Energy must have an outlet. And when we think about our repression individually, collectively, societally, worldwide, you start to see the equation and the unilateral way in which this oppression, suppression, has itself exhibited within our lives. And I think that there is this union between repression and what we call suffering. What we call suffering. Ernest Holmes also wrote in the Science of Mind textbook, one of the bigger definitions of suffering is that God, that which you understand God to be, never intended for man to suffer. So let me explain that a little bit more in depth. God, as we understand it, is not a deity. It's not someone in the sky with a beard and a pitchfork and a pencil with a book going, bad, good. None of that. That God is just synonymous with the understanding of life itself. It is an inherent energy. In fact, it's the energy that is behind all of life. It is creation. It is absolute love. It is infinite intelligence. It's divine design and perfect patterning. It is the creative mind that created worlds. That is God. It is the all with a capital A-L-L, which then includes you and I. So what we do is we say that I am not exclusively God, but I am a part of that which is God. And you see, the degree in which I am willingly able to move beyond my suffering and my repression is the degree in which I begin to taste what it's like to have that infinite intelligence expressed through me. And it's all according to my own volition, my own choice. And so when it says that God never intended man to suffer, let me put it this way. That which is the divine intelligence actually knows nothing of suffering. So it cannot know suffering. It cannot see you and I as suffering beings because it cannot define that. So where did suffering come from? It is a human invention. Just as limitation is a human invention, just as dis-ease is a human invention, just as separation and duality are human inventions. It's the gift that you and I were given long ago to be able to choose. Because we're not robots, we have this gift of free will. And in that free will, we have cultivated these polarities. So we have freedom as one end of the polarity, and we have repression on the other end of the polarity. We have joy on one end of the polarity, and we have suffering on the other end of the polarity. The key then, and the opportunity, is which way on those lines of expression are we moving towards? And you start to see that it isn't anybody else's business how that happens to us. It's entirely ours. So when he says God never intended man to suffer, he does say this: suffering may be salutary in that it leads us to a place where we learn that it is unnecessary. What did he just say? There's actually some good then in suffering. What? Because, hear me out, so that means that when you and I have suffered, which we all have in some degree, some of us are suffering right now, immediately in this moment. Look around you. You can see it on their faces. I'm kidding. Stop looking, Joy. Those times of suffering that we have been ensconced in actually serve us in order for us to experience the redemption from that. So that when we rise above suffering, then we can understand and see the value of the lesson and see the value of the journey. That's why we always say, the dark night of the soul, those things are valuable because they make us understand and appreciate the light. That which happened to us as our story has value in it as long as we move towards redemption rather than staying stagnant in the story. So all of those things serve us to the degree that we allow them not to be the final chapter of our story, but to be somewhere in the middle, so that we then continue to refine ourselves and continue to rewrite and redraft and culminate and create the story and the history of our own making, not to let that become the calling card. He goes on to say, we shall cease to suffer as we more and more comply with the laws of the universe. All suffering then is a result of some infringement on these laws. That law, obviously, being the law of cause and effect. Cause meaning choice. For every choice that is in the energy of separation, lack, limitation, self-condemnation, anytime we choose those particular things, then that law will bring us the effect of suffering. And yet, you and I, again, have the opportunity to rise above that. Think about the genius that is already in you. Think about the genius that was in you as an infant when you were first learning to stand up. What's so beautiful about infancy is that we haven't become domesticated yet. We haven't learned skin color. We haven't learned prejudice. We haven't learned cynicism. We haven't learned self-condemnation. So as we inherently observe the instinct within us that wants to rise up, we pull ourselves up, we try to wobble and walk, and we smack and we fall down. Can you imagine if we had the consciousness of our adulthood in that moment? We might go, I'm not getting back up again. That's a bunch of crap. You, pick me up. Carry me. You know, and then all of a sudden you have the world's most entitled baby. No. Can you imagine? Thank God, the purity and the innocence that is coalescing itself with the genius inside of us does what? It pulls right back up again, and it pulls right back up again, and it pulls right back up again, until incrementally we develop the muscle where we're able to move. It isn't until we move into these larger, expansive skin suits that we start to doubt ourselves. You didn't have doubt then. Did you ever stop to think about that? There was a point in your life when you were fearless. You were fearless. And you see, it's the absence then of our fearlessness that brings us suffering. But we have learned, he also says, the world is beginning to realize that it has learned all that it should through suffering and pain. I also love that line by Ernest Holmes, because what he's saying is there's no new suffering that's waiting in the back that's going to say, boom, how about this? There's nothing new under the sun of humankind that is a new form of suffering that has not already been expressed and developed by human nature. And so he's saying we've learned all that we need to learn from the darkness. We've learned all that we need to learn from bashing ourselves in self-condemnation. You've already learned everything. There's nothing new to be added to that. So what are your options? Your options then are to continue the same old, or to realize that there is another opportunity for me with regards to my relationship with suffering. So repression of any kind, the repression of your desire, the repression of your emotions, the judgment of your emotionality, anything that is repressing your nature equates itself to suffering. So when you say that you can't, when you say that it is too late, when you compare yourself to another, you are just feeding the ongoing animal of your own suffering. And as Ernest reminds us, we've learned all that we need to know from that. What I love about a new year, this time of year, is, like I've said before, there's just this innate sense of personal permission that we give ourselves that we don't for the rest of the year. So take advantage of it. Take advantage of hitting your own reset button and allowing yourself to see that perhaps you have learned all that you need to learn from suffering. Really? Do you want to perpetuate that into 2016? Do you? Because if it is, then obviously you are at choice. So I looked at some of the ways that suffering really exemplifies itself in a predominant ongoing way, either consciously or unconsciously seen or unseen within our own lives. The first one that I really notate and I observe and I hear from other people is we suffer by holding grudges against ourselves and others. Grudge holding. Grudge holding. Even the word grudge, it rhymes with smudge and sludge. It's just not a really poetic, pretty word, is it? I don't know of a nice word that it rhymes with. Fudge. Okay, all right. I take it all back. All right. But when we suffer by holding grudges against other individuals, what we fail to understand in the bigger, deeper dive is that when I have a thought crime against another person, that other person is just an extension of me. You see, in mental science, when we talk about the fact that we are one, there is no distance, there is no separation between who I am as a soul being and who you are as a soul being. There is no difference geographically to people who are clear across the world. The oneness that is being talked about is the fact that energetically, subjectively, within the realm of universal mind, what I think affects the condition of the entire planet. What another thinks sends out a ripple effect that has the ability to affect the entire planet. My responsibility, the beautiful luxury and call of me as a change agent, is to become hyper aware of the thoughts that I think. So as I am judging a person, I'm actually simply taking that energy and directing it inward towards me. I might not think that that's what I'm doing, but I've never met a person who is gleefully, joyfully whole who judges other people. They are miserable human beings. They are ill. They are void of any kind of expansion, because how can you be when you are diametrically opposed to the way in which law exemplifies itself? So when I say, I am my brother or my sister's keeper, actually, I am my brother, I am my sister. There is no separation in that. So when I hold these thought crimes against another, when I hold grudges, the self-righteous indignation of, you did this to me. And you start to realize that to the degree, year after year, decade after decade, that I continue to hold on to this, is similar to me being the infant who refuses to rise up again. And I'm expecting someone else to come and change, modify, or do something to make my life better, rather than me being the one who sees the opportunity to pull myself up and begin a practice of forgiveness. Forgiveness, as you know, is not about the other person. Forgiveness is simply like spraying spiritual Windex on the lens of my perception of the world and cleaning that perception in such a way that I am not imprisoned by my thoughts. And so there's a zillion ways in which you and I cultivate spiritual practice to free ourselves from the grudge, from the thought crime, from the hatred, from the angst and separation that we have built by other people. I love the one by the magnificent teacher, Edwene Gaines. You know, she's the prosperity queen. She says none of us can be prosperous if we are grudge holders. It's just not going to happen. And she said that forgiveness is one of the 4 pillars of being prosperous. And she, who had lots of husbands, she'll be the first to tell you she had lots of husbands. She said, I had to start with husband number 1, you know. And she would begin to write out, I, Edwene, forgive myself for judging, and she would fill in the blank. And she, being a unity minister and very much a part of biblical scripture, she took the old saying of when the apostle asked Jesus, how many times should I forgive? And his answer was 70 times 7, which is really just a metaphor for you just do it for the rest of your life. But she, would take that literal number, and 70 times a day, 7 days a week, she would write, I, Edwene, forgive myself for judging, fill in the blank. Sometimes then that would morph to, I, Edwene, forgive myself for judging myself. And she would do this practice for years. And all of us are invited to do this practice for years in order to begin to free ourselves from the unseen and seen repression and suffering that we carry around with us. I am, you are, our brothers and sisters. There is no separation. We do not actually have the luxury to hold a grudge if what we're saying is that we are open to our infinite nature. Don't have the luxury for that. That's so 1979. It's time for a new way. One of the other ways we suffer is by taking others' inventory instead of minding our own business. That sounded like, oh. So I found this wonderful story. It says, once upon a time there was an inn called the Silver Star. And the innkeeper was unable to make ends meet, even though he did his very best to draw customers by making the service cordial, the prices reasonable. But in despair, he consulted a wise sage. After listening to his tale, the sage said, it's very simple. You must change the name of your inn. Impossible, said the innkeeper. It has been called the Silver Star for generations, and it is very well known by that name. No, said the sage firmly. You must now call it the 5 Bells, and have a row of 6 bells hanging at the entrance. 6 bells? But that's absurd. What good will that do? Try it, he said. and the innkeeper gave it a try. And this is what happened. Just about every traveler who passed by the inn walked in to point out the mistake. Each believing that no one else had noticed it. And once inside, they were so impressed by the cordiality of the service that they stayed and refreshed themselves, soon providing the innkeeper with the success that he had long been seeking. There are few things the ego delights in more than correcting other people's mistakes. Go ahead, look at the person next to you. It's true. We suffer. We suffer by taking another's inventory instead of minding our own business or taking our own inventory. And you see, at the beginning of a new year, we have this opportunity to look at and to reflect upon what did and didn't work for us last year. What did we love? What felt good? And what felt repressing? What felt oppressive? What felt like it was equated to suffering? What was those things that didn't work? And begin to take our own inventory with regards to operating and implementing some kind of change. And when we are allowed to focus and turn that insight into us rather than onto someone else, then we begin to see all of the times that we have avoided doing our own work by looking at other people and saying, let me fix you. Because then other people become our projects. And it becomes far too convenient for us to continue to avoid doing what is ours to do for ourselves. And the third one that I came up with is we suffer by expecting the world to do for us what is ours to do. So just like that infant, that baby, can you imagine refusing to stand up again? And there are times, surely, when we have been suffering where it has felt impossible to stand. I often equate the idea that when we look at our theme, a world that works for everyone, it is working for everyone at the level of their cooperation of it. But there are people on our planet, and we have all been there, when we were completely ignorant of the fact that we were a part of something that was whole. We were completely ignorant of the fact of our own self-empowerment. We were completely ignorant of the fact that we had the ability to choose. We've all been there. I look at those people as being people who are in quicksand, but they don't know that they're in quicksand, but they are floundering. How many of you remember a time when you were in quicksand and floundering? What I know doesn't work is when you and I then stand on terra firma and we go and we say, highest and best for you. I'll pray for you. Because they're not available for that. I wasn't available for that. I know that in my times of suffering where I wore that suffering as a badge of honor, I was not willing or available to hear about self-responsibility. And I'm sure you were at a place in your life where you were not able to hear about self-responsibility. And so just like the Good Samaritan, there is that opportunity for us to pick another person up, not from a codependent standpoint per se, where we then don't take them to the next level, but by offering somebody a stick, you know, that metaphoric stick that pulls them out of the quicksand, cleans them off, feeds them, gives them a hot meal, provides them an opportunity then where they might be available to listen to something else. And so sometimes the idea of codependency has gotten a bad rap. Because if that kind of help and assistance for other person was completely codependent, then like Mother Teresa was the biggest codependent person that ever lived. You know, and so sometimes we've mistaken service for that. But there is a point in service in creating a world that works for everyone, where we then, after the stick has been given, they've been cleaned off, there we have to say, now it's up to you. You see, if I continue to then pacify the suffering, even when they're standing and they're all washed and fully dressed and their bellies are full, that's a whole different level of suffering. And some of us are there. Some of us are out of the quicksand. Some of us have managed to pull it together. Some of us are just getting by. We have just enough. And we're still waiting for some external force, some white knight on a horse to come and ride in and fix it for us. I remember a woman in another city at another center, and that was her theme. And I sat with this woman, pulled her out of the quicksand, cleaned her up, and she would not let go of the imagery of the fact that somebody else was going to ride in and complete her. And I told her one day, I said, guess what? That horse done been rode and put up. That white knight's probably gay and with somebody else. You need to let that go. Because if you don't, you will miss the one who is coming to be your dance partner on the floor of infinite potentiality. Because you are so fixated on the way it has to look. Nola Jones Perry. How many of you love Nola Jones Perry? Where are you? She wrote a poem. Oh, she just happens to be on the front row. She wrote a poem. And what was the line? The line that caught my attention and Penelope's attention was, "Ain't nobody coming." Sing it, girl. She's never sung before in her life. You're going to love this.
Ain't nobody coming. Ain't nobody coming. Ain't nobody coming to save your soul. You've got to get going. Reach deep down inside you. 'Cause within is the heart of gold. Infinite intelligence. Give me resilience. Giving me love to cool my pain. I know it takes forgiveness. To this I am a witness. Takes me from love again and again. Ain't nobody coming.
Nobody.
Ain't nobody coming.
Nobody.
Ain't nobody coming to save your soul. You've got to get going.
Come on, Nola.
Reach deep down within you. Within you is a pot of gold. Ain't nobody coming. Ain't nobody coming.
Nobody.
Ain't nobody coming to save your soul. You've got to get going. Reach deep down within you. Within you is a heart of gold.
Take your bow. Take your bow. So, So said the islander to the people. Yes. And together we say, and so it is. Thank you. Hi, it's David Ault. I simply want to say thank you. Thank you for taking the time to be with us and to watch our broadcast here at Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta. We have a vision, and that vision is to reawaken all to their spiritual magnificence. In order for us to be able to do that, we rely on the donations and the contributions that come in weekly that enable us to... Hi, I'm David Ault, and I simply want to say thanks. Thanks for joining us and for taking the time to listen. Hi, I'm David Ault, and I simply want to say thanks. Thanks for taking the time to watch our broadcast here at Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta. We have a vision, and that vision is to reawaken all to their spiritual magnificence. And one of the ways that we are able to do that is through this very medium of broadcasting. So if you got anything out of this, if you felt in any way inspired, or if something spoke to you directly, then I extend an invitation to you to become a part of our family by donating. And there are many ways in order for you to be able to do that. One is to simply go to our website at slca.com, and there you will find all different kinds of prompts that will help you support what it is that we are doing here in Atlanta. One way is to become a pledger. That means that you decide on a monthly basis that you are going to help us with this vision. Another way is to donate through our management system called Fellowship One, another through PayPal, and another even easier way is on your cell phone. You can do what's called text to tithe, and that number is 404-796-7030. Again, thank you so much for your support, and I invite you to come back weekly to see what it is that we're up to. Blessings.